Good day. My name is Sam Aldrin Pauli Jr. from Group 4, BSE 3A. Confined Space Safety. Course Objectives. The aim of this lesson is to provide students with the necessary knowledge on the hazards of working in a confined space, safe use of tools and equipments, control of hazards, and emergency procedures. At the end of the lesson, the students will be able to know the different types of confined space and definitions, be knowledgeable of the different types of hazards that can be found inside the confined space, understand controls to prevent CS accidents, and understand emergency evacuation. There are about 11,000 injuries in confined spaces every single year in the USA. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries, from 2011 to 2018, there are 1,030 workers died from occupational injuries involving a confined space. That's like more or less 6 deaths every 2 weeks. The problem with this is that if people were following procedures, almost all of these incidents could have been prevented. Pero paano ka nga naman susunod sa safety procedures kung di mo matukoy kung ano ba ang isang confined space? Yan ang pag-aaralan natin ngayon. Confined space safety. You can't really be safe in a confined space unless you know what one is. May point nga naman, kapag alam mo na nasa confined space ka, alam mo yung mga procedures na dapat gawin, at may hahanda mo yung sarili mo sa mga maaaring mangyari sa loob. Define natin ang confined space. Confined space definition according to OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. A space has to be large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work. It should have limited or restricted means for entry and exit. And it is not designed for continuous human occupancy. Ngayon, isa-isayin natin ang mga yan. Number 1. A space has to be large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work. Sa Tagalog, ang isang lugar ay dapat may sapat na kaluwagan upang ikaw ay makapagtrabaho sa loob. Photo number 1 fits that criteria. You can actually get into that tank and do work like cleaning and repairs. Photo number 2 is just like the first. You could get inside it and do your job. Photo number 3 does not. Judging by the image, these workers could not physically get inside that tank. Kung di ka makapasok, hindi mo na kailangan lumabas kung sakaling maaksidente ka sa loob. Kasi nga, wala ka naman sa loob at the first place. Number 2. It should have limited or restricted means for entry and exit. Ito very straightforward. Ang hinahanap lang ay kung mahirap bang maglabas-masok sa loob. If you were injured inside that space or if there was an emergency, how difficult would it be for you to exit? Getting an injured person out of this utility hole is a big challenge. So yes, check. Generally speaking, any space that needs to be accessed by ladders is a confined space, like this trench. If the access to the space is limited, in this case, this vault door, it's going to make entry and exit more difficult. Another note, if you could freely enter a space without having to step over a raised threshold or stoop under the opening, and if the equipment in the space doesn't interfere with traveling to the exit, it's not considered a confined space in terms of entry and exit. Number 3. It is not designed for continuous human occupancy. Tanungin mo lang yung sarili mo. Dapat ka bang manatili sa isang lugar na yon sa loob ng mahabang oras? Photo number 1. This workplace is not designed for people to be in long term. Photo number 2. This photo is the inside of a cooling tower from the ground looking up at the inside. It is not intended for human occupancy. At yung photo number 3, this place may not be small, but people should not stay inside it for long term.
Good day, everyone. My name is Junior Urikia, and my topic was confined space hazards. Hazardous atmosphere, unsafe amounts of flammable gas, vapor, mist, or dust, harmful levels of hazardous substance, Nakakalaso ng atmosphere, pati na rin sa area na lugar na ito at kapaligiran na maaaring magdulot ng iba't ibang matinding epekto sa panlabas na kaanyuan at kabilang na rin dito ang kawalan ng malay at kamatayan. Maaari rin malaso ng iyong katawan at magkaroon o makapasok ng mapanganib na elemento o sangkap ng kemikal sa iyong katawan na maaaring magdulot sa iyo ng cancer. Enjolment by materials. Enjolment results when a worker is surrounded and overcome by a granular substance such as a soil, sand, gravel, sawdust, seed, grain, or flour, or it's submerged in a liquid such as a water or a chemical. So nakikita niyo sa picture, meron ditong isang worker na kinakailangan niya magsuot ng body harness para maging safe upang hindi siya malubog dito sa mga dito sa grain na to at dangerous configuration or shape. When the design, shape, or dimensions of a confined space pose a risk to occupants, that space is said to possess a configuration hazard. For example, a worker needing to descend into a vessel through a small opening at the top would need to be lowered using a specialized fall protection and access system. Common misconceptions. I don't need, I'm sorry. I don't smell or see anything funny. It's alright to enter. I'll just stick my head in and take a look. I'm not really entering the space. Everything checks out. When can you go to work? And put the testing equipment away. I'll be able to hold my breath and get out if anything does happen. So, ito yung mga kadalasang inaakala ng karamihan na tama pero mali pala. Wag po nating gagawin to. Lagi natin isipin ang safety first nating ating sarili. Maaari tayong magsuot ng netong hard hat upang maprotektahan ang ating ulo sa mga debris na bumabagsak sa ground. Common mistakes. People underestimate the danger in a confined space. Nakita nyo naman sa mga pictures na yan mga parang careless na workers na nag-i-smoke, alam na nila na bawal mag-smoke sa area. And then nakita nyo naman sila, masyado silang careless talaga. Possible dangers. Oxygen deficiency, combustible, flammable, explosive atmosphere, toxic gases or vapors, physical hazards, corrosive chemicals, biologicals, unknowns. Yan. Physical hazards. Evaluation of a confined space must consider the following potential hazards: temperatures, extreme noise, slick, wet surfaces, falling, sharp objects. Heat hazards. Increasing in order of severity, heat disorders include heat rush, heat cramps, heat exhaustion, heat stroke. So, yun yung mga possible kapag ikaw ay labis na na-expose sa sobrang kainitan sa iyong pagtatrabaho, sa area ng iyong trabaho. Electrical hazards. Electrical sources that are used in confined space can create electrocution, ignition source, explosion, slips, trips, and falls. Noise hazards. Noise exposure can cause serious hearing damage. Length of exposure, the loudness, the frequency. Hearing protection, earplugs. Earplugs are made of foam, rubber, or plastic, are either one size fits all or in sizes small, medium, and large. Some are disposable, some are reusable, which must be washed daily. They are lightweight and require no maintenance. They are inserted into the ear canal. So ito yun, meron ako ditong sample ng earplug na ina-attach lang sa tenga para maiwasan ang pagkasira na yung pandinig. Ganito lang kasimple pag ina-attach. So yan. Thank you.
Good day, I am Lance Nilcanoño and I'm here today to report about the permit required confined spaces. In the permit required confined spaces, we have permit program components, and these are identifying the confined spaces, assessing the hazards, determining how to manage hazards, identify permit required spaces, produce entry procedures, and develop entry permit. So, dito, yung bumubuo sa pagkakaroon ng permit mo pag nagkakaroon ka ng project or activity na sa isang confined space. Dito sa permit required confined spaces, meron tayong entry permit. Sa entry permit, meron tayong hazard control procedures, acceptable entry conditions, atmospheric test results, equipment, emergency procedures, communication, tsaka iba pang mga information. Ito yung mga requirement or yung mga chine-check bago ka makapasok or gumawa sa isang confined space. Isa rin ito para maiwasan yung mga aksidente na pwedeng mangyari sa once na pumasok ka sa isang confined space at meron kang activity na gagawin. Dito mo rin malalaman or mai-check na kung yung mga gamit mo or lahat ng mga required para gawin mo yung mga gagawin mo sa isang confined space tama. Meron tayong andito naman yung responsibilidad ng mga tao or personnel na papasok sa isang confined space. An entrant must know the hazard which may be faced during entry. So, dapat aware siya kung ano yung mga pwedeng masamang mangyari once na pumasok siya sa isang confined space. Recognize the signs and symptoms of exposure to a hazard. Ayun, yung sa mga, syempre may mga signs tayo na makikita once na nagpunta ka sa isang confined space. At tsaka, dapat malaman mo yung mga signs na to or symptoms. Dapat malaman mo na yung mga mangyayari sa'yo kapag na-expose ka sa mga to. Next is understand the consequences of exposure to hazard. Ayun, ganun din. Dapat alam mo yung pwedeng mangyari sa'yo once na magkaroon ka ng exposure sa mga hazard na to. Next is maintain contact with the attendant. Ayun, sa may kailangan mo ng connection with the one na nag-a-attend sa'yo or yung tao sa labas para continuous or mas safe yung yung progress niya sa trabaho niyo. Kasi syempre, mamaya pala di nagbe-message yung nasa loob. Mamaya na-suffocate or nahimatay na. Kaya kailangan talaga ng constant contact with the attendant. Tapos kailangan mo rin mag-notify. You should notify the attendant when the entrant staff initiates evacuation. Ayun. Kailangan mong mag-inform sa tao or personnel na nandun or yung sa attendant para umalis ka doon sa may confined space. Kasi baka mamaya biglang umalis ka tapos meron palang procedure na ginagawa na hindi ka na pwedeng magpahamak sa'yo tapos lumabas ka agad. Yun. Safety purposes. Next is be aware of PPE such as retrieval lines, respirators, or clothing needed or for safe entry and exit. Ayun, kailangan mo syempre ng PPE, personal protective equipment, para sa safety mo na rin. Katulad na rin ng next, use PPE properly. Dapat alam mo yung mga functions or pwede mong gamitin para sa mga PPE mo or anong mga use nila. And dapat gawin mo yon. Next is protect themselves from external hazards. Ayan. Dapat as ikaw yung papasok sa isang confined space, dapat magkaroon ka ng responsibility sa sarili mo na protektahan yung sarili mo para sa mga external na hazard or mga dangerous external things na nandun sa loob. Lastly is perform no other duties that interfere with primary duty. Ayun. Syempre, kailangan mo maging focus dun sa may mga ginagawa mo sa isang confined space. Kasi mamaya, kung ano-anong ginagawa mo, tapos yung dapat mong gawin, nakalimutan mo na or naka-affect yung ibang ginagawa mo dun sa may duty mo. Baka rin makapagpahamak sa'yo. Of the attendant. The entry attendant remains outside the confined space, constantly monitor by visual auditor or auditory communication, authorized entrance, working inside the space. Ito yung specific na parang duty ng isang attendant is to prohibit unauthorized entries. So, an attendant has the power to prohibit or yung magbawal sa mga sa mga taong papasok doon sa isa-isang confined space. Next is they ensure atmospheric test is conducted and signed permit is available prior to allowing entry. Ayun. Syempre, i-check niya muna yung yung atmospheric test. Syempre, may oxygen na kailangan or atmospheric things na itetest, kunyari mainit, malamig man o ganun. Kaya kailangan mo rin yun. Syempre, for safety din ng papasok sa loob. At ito pa yung mga yung mga responsibilities ng attendant is test before entering the space, test at different levels. Yung katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, test for sa atmospheric sa may atmosphere sa loob, yung kunyari, yung sa malamig, mainit. Tapos dito naman, itetest mo yung oxygen content, flammable or explosive substances, toxic gases or vapors. Para maiwasan mo na rin yung mga other chemicals or other contents na pwedeng magpahamak sa'yo or magpahamak sa taong papasok doon sa isang confined space. Next is test before and during work where the atmosphere may change. Ayun. First and foremost, kailangan before napapasok yung isang tao sa isang confined space, kailangan mong i-check or i-test yung mga dapat i-test. Tapos syempre, kailangan mo rin at during the work, kailangan mo rin i-test para kung may pagbabago man or something na pwedeng maging dangerous nung habang naggagawa ka, yun, mawawarningan mo yung tao sa loob. Tapos, ayun, ito some examples nito is welding, drilling, sludge removal, cleaning with solvents. Ayun. So, ayun, that sums up.
Good day, I am Renz Joseph Furila, and for now, let's move on to dilution ventilation. Dilution ventilation is defined as the addition of fresh, clean air into potentially contaminated air to reduce the concentration of airborne contaminants such as vapors, gases, viral aerosols, particles, or smoke. Dilution ventilation introduces fresh air to space. It is best when toxicity levels and concentrations are low, and best when contaminants are well distributed, and it requires larger volume when contaminants generated at a point. Here's a detailed representation of dilution ventilation. Dilution ventilation requires an open window for the provision of fresh outside air, and an air duct or pipe, and an exhaust system. And dilution ventilation requires an exhaust fan for the removal of contaminated air and for the cooling purposes. Ventilators or blowers. It is used to maintain acceptable atmospheres. Hang hose at least 2 feet above the floor and ensure blower supplies clean air. Extend duct to full length and keep straight. Next, ventilation. Ventilation is defined as the intentional introduction of outdoor air into a space. Ventilation under certain conditions where flammable gases or vapors have displaced the oxygen level but are too rich to burn, forced air ventilation may dilute them until they are within the explosive range. If inert gases are used in the confined space, the space should be well ventilated and retested before a worker may enter. A common method of ventilation requires a long hose. One end of the hose is attached to a fan and the other lowered into a manhole or opening. Never use pure oxygen to ventilate a confined space. Ventilate with fresh air from a clean source because oxygen enrichment in enclosed areas increases the risk of ignition. An oxygen-enriched atmosphere above 21% will cause flammable materials such as clothing and hair to burn violently when ignited. And FYI, oxygen is not flammable, but it can cause other materials that burn to ignite. Duties of attendant. It is duties of attendant to ensure appropriate PPEs are worn by entrants such as earplug, clear safety glass, dust mask, disposable coverall. Next, personal protective equipment. For most confined spaces, the minimum PPE required is safety glasses, safety shoes, and hard hats or helmets. Additional PPE will be required as defined by the hazards that may be encountered in the confined space, such as gloves, protective clothing, hearing protection, respirators, goggles, or face shields. Next, safety equipment. Safety harness and lifeline. A safety harness and lifeline must be worn by all personnel entering a permit space. Where the entrance is too restricted to allow removal of a person equipped with a safety harness, use a shoulder type or wrist harness. When making a vertical entry into a permit space, which is 6 feet deep or more, fall protection is required. Maintain at entry point the following equipment, such as warning signs, audible warning, portable lighting, fire extinguishers, self-contained breathing apparatus or SCBA, retrieval or lifeline with 5,000 pounds tensile strength minimum. Communication. Contact between the entrant and the attendant is extremely important and constant. Communication must be maintained. Communication may be accomplished by sight, verbal, radio, rope, and hand signals. Communication must be identified in place and operable for emergency purposes. And for last, general safety practices. Never enter a confined space if you are not authorized to do so. Get out if you feel dizzy, lightheaded, or sick. Report any hazardous conditions or injuries. Never remove respirators while working in a confined space. Don't smoke in confined spaces. Stay alert at all times. Concentrate on the job you are doing at all times. And respect and handle equipment properly. And that's all. Thank you. And you are free to ask questions.